Every once in a while, you hear a debate that just frames the issue perfectly. You've got Rachel Maddow, who's for affirmative action. You've got Pat Buchanan, who's against affirmative action. And the question is it okay to discriminate against white males? Now, the civil rights laws were written to protect everyone, regardless of race, and given equal opportunity to pursue job and educational opportunities. But this is not necessarily the case in the real world. Give it a listen, and at the end of it, please leave your comments. I'd be interested to read them. Keep them civil, though.
What do you think that affirmative action is for?
Affirmative action is to increase diversity by discriminating against white males, as Alan Backey was discriminated at the University of California at Davis, as Brian Weber, that worker in Louisiana, was discriminated against, as Frank Rickey and those firefighters were discriminated against, as Jennifer Gratz was discriminated against and kept out of the University of Michigan, which she set her heart on, even though her grades were far higher than people who were allowed in there. That's the type. Affirmative action is basically reverse discrimination against white males, and it's as wrong as discrimination against black females and Hispanics and others, and that's why I oppose it.
I obviously have a different view about it, but I wanted to give you a chance to explain what you.
But why do you have a different view?
Well,
why is it okay to discriminate against white males?
Let me ask.
She won't answer Pat Buchanan's question about if she thinks it's okay to discriminate against white males, because she cannot justify discrimination against one specific group of people without undermining all of her arguments in support of affirmative action, because her whole platform is against discrimination, right? It's all about being fair to everybody, except if you're a white male. But she won't say that.
He said, I'm an affirmative action baby.
Yes.
I got into Princeton on affirmative action. I got into Yale. I didn't have these scores that these other kids did. How did she get on Yale Law Review? Affirmative action. How did she get on the federal bench by Moynihan? Moynihan needs an Hispanic woman, just like Barack Obama needs an Hispanic woman. That is not the criteria we ought to use, Rachel,
Pat,
for Supreme Court justices, conservative or liberal. That's why I opposed Harriet Mier. I said, I know she's going to vote with me. She's a good Christian woman. She's probably a fine lawyer, but she's not Supreme Court material, and neither is Sonia Sotomayor. And I think you know that, Rachel.
I don't know that at all. And I would say that if you and I agree that what our country needs is to be able to choose from the largest possible pool of talent in order to be able to pick the people who are going to have to function at the highest level so that our country can compete and that our country can do all the hard things we need to do.
Hey, Rachel. How can it be the largest group of the finest minds that America has to offer if it excludes an entire group of people based on the color of their skin? That's what Pat Buchanan's point he's trying to make. You cannot discriminate against anyone. Period. No one. She just can't seem to understand that concept.
You have to be a white guy in order to get considered for these jobs, and has been true since the dawn of time in this country.
No.
That's starting to break up now so that we can tap a bigger pool of talent. You should be happy about that for your country, Pat.
I do. I'm happy when you got all 78 firemen can take a test, but if all the guys that win in the test are all white guys and one is a Hispanic, I don't say automatically the test was fixed, biased, bigoted against black people, because I don't know that, Rachel.
Pat Buchanan is referring to those New Haven firefighters, 19 white men, 1 Hispanic. A few years ago, they took a test to qualify for promotion. Those 20 men passed the test, but either not enough blacks passed the test or no black passed the test, so the blacks threatened to sue, so the city threw out the results of the test, and nobody got a promotion. I just find that that's just it would be funny if it wasn't so serious. Now think about it. You got a group of people who take a test. They all take the same test, but the ones who fail say the test discriminated against them. Go figure. But that's the world Rachel Maddow lives in.
And those guys did well in that test, and they are victims of this evil affirmative action policy, which says, in effect, that everybody's covered by the 14th Amendment and the civil rights laws unless you're a white male and your parents and ancestors came from Europe. Then we can discriminate against you. That's what I am against.
Pat, are you happy that we've got a Latino on the Supreme Court for the first time, or we're about to? Does that seem like a positive thing for the country?
I think the Republicans had an outstanding Latino who had outstanding grades and was brilliant and was gutted. Miguel Estrada. I was all for him for the appellate court.
Let me just ask you the question before going to talk about some other Latino who's not a question here.
This is a very revealing moment about people like Rachel Maddow. It's not about race and all that. It's about political party. Because the Latino that Pat Buchanan just mentioned was a nominee for the Supreme Court, but he was conservative, so he don't count. So when she asks these questions about, don't you feel good about a Latino being on the Supreme Court, it's all bogus, because they had the chance to put a Latino on the Supreme Court, but he was conservative and he was shot down.
Pat, I couldn't disagree with you more. I credit you to sticking to your guns. I think you're absolutely wrong about this, and I think that by advocating that the Republican Party try to stir up racial animus among white voters here, you're really dating yourself. You're dating yourself.
I say, I think they ought to do.
No, actually, she's dated herself, because this country's trying to move forward to a colorless society where everybody is judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, like Martin Luther King said. She just dated herself. She's still trying to satisfy some liberal color palette where qualifications doesn't matter, but skin color does.
To defend the legitimate rights of white working class folks who are the victims of discrimination, because that's the right thing to do and because it's the politically right thing to do. It so happens that here that doing the right thing is the right political thing. Standing up for Frank Rickey, we saw the face of a victim of these policies. Rachel, you and your friends admire up there in New York, and you never look at these guys who are working class guys with their own dreams.
Pat,
just like Sonia Syed.
I don't need a lecture from you about whether or not I know what working class.
You certainly do.
Pat, I really don't need a lecture from you about what I think about working class Americans, or what anybody else in New York, including Sonia Sotomayor, who grew up in the Bronx, thinks about working class Americans.
Here's another revealing moment. Rachel Maddow knows that the people most affected by affirmative action is the working class people of this country. And I don't think she's up to mustering up an argument to justify discriminating against white working class people of this country.
A lot of things divide us, Pat. Race is one of those things, but there's a lot of other ways in which we stratify as a country. And for you to privilege race and say that what we really need to make sure we tap politically is white people's racial grievances, you're playing with fire and you're dating yourself. You're living in the 1950s, Pat.
I'm dating the 1960s when the Civil Rights Act was passed. Do you think Frank Ritchie and those guys were treated justly when they were denied that promotion because they were white?
Pat Buchanan, MSNBC political analyst. I'm very sorry that we're out of time. It's nice to have you back on the show, Pat. Thanks.
I've enjoyed it.
She's not sorry she's out of time. She's happy she's out of time because she don't want to answer that question. Like I said before, she cannot justify discrimination of one group of people without undermining all of her arguments in support of affirmative action. All right, here's my full disclosure. I have edited this show down to shorten it and just to focus on specific points that I wanted to comment on. You owe it to yourself to go to Rachel Maddow's website and see the show in its entirety. That way, you see it complete. And you also owe it to yourself to perhaps Google that New Haven firefighters case and read the details of it. And, come to your own conclusions. I don't care if you're white, green, or yellow. I mean, read it and see if you think it was fair what happened to those men. Now, this is the discussion that Eric Holder was saying that we were too cowards to, America was cowards in discussing. We can talk about race as long as it's an honest discussion, void of political propaganda and all that other garbage everybody tries to pour into the mix. We need this discussion. Let's do it.